Hi, I'm Rich Munson from the site Tensoku Ryu, the organization that defines and manages the art of Tensoku Ryu. I want to talk a little bit today about salutations. We have two primary forms of salutation, one that's informal and one that's more formal. And I wanted to cover both of those a little bit for you today. The first form is just a simple bow. And that basically involves bringing your feet together, your hands are at your side, and we bend forward at the waist and bow to a more senior individual. We also use that to bow when we enter or exit a training area, and in mini dojo you will bow as you enter and leave the dojo. So it's just an informal greeting. It's a way of saying hi or showing respect. So you bow to show respect to a training area, you bow to show respect to a more senior person. It's not a sign of subservience. We're not saying that we are somehow less important than the other person. We're just showing some respect. The second form of salutation is a bit more formal, and so I'll cover the hand positions and then a little bit about the meaning of those hand positions in the next segment. The more formal salutation involves several hand positions and a little bit of stance transitions. So I'll cover that for you for now. I'll just basically give you the salutation so you can see how it's performed. And then we'll talk a little bit later about the hand positions that are involved and the meanings behind those. So the basic salutation involves standing with your feet basically shoulder width apart. Your hands come together so the palms touch the entire length of the hand. Palms and fingers all touch. That's your first hand position. The second hand position, we're going to lower our hands so that they're basically at waist height. And this position, the palms do not touch. The hand is open. Only the fingertips are touching. The next position, the right hand is going to close into a fist. The left hand overlays on top of it. And at this point, our left leg will slide in and we'll bring our hands both to a set position. Hands are fully closed and tight against our side. We only hold this for a moment, and then the foot slides back to its original position, and our hands extend forward, and they remain in a vertical position. They're not angled somehow. Their fists are vertical. At this point, the salutation is done. Often you'll see people come and bow again. That's an optional part of the salutation, but it's common that people will do that. In the next couple sections, we'll talk a little bit about each hand position, what it signifies and means, and then we'll talk a little bit about the difference between an instructor and a student doing the salutation. This first hand position has several meanings. The first is that we want to seek peace. It's a little different. This has no religious connotation. We're not praying, so we're not praying for peace. We're seeking peace. The difference is praying for peace is, in our view, a little bit passive. You're hoping a peaceful solution might evolve somehow, whereas if you're seeking peace, you're actually trying to make some sort of peaceful resolution of a potential conflict situation. So we always use that as a seeking peace connotation rather than a praying for peace connotation. The second is that it helps reinforce the concept of keeping your guard up, remaining vigilant. If you're in a potential conflict situation or an active conflict situation, you don't want to lose sight of defensive mechanisms or defensive postures. So we want to have that reminder always that keep your guard up, maintain vigilance at all times. And then finally, the hand position talks about or connotes our escaping skills. So, we would be using these hand positions or, some derivation off of this as part of our escaping mechanisms. So this connotates our escaping skills. So next I want to talk a little bit about our second hand position. So our second hand position signifies that we don't want to inflict any unnecessary harm on anybody. We're not here to be belligerent. We're only here in a defensive capacity, so we don't want to unnecessarily harm anybody. So if we're in a conflict and we get to a point where we think we may harm somebody and they are defenseless, we want to be able to stop. The second connotation of this hand position is it symbolizes our thwarting skills. So for those of you who haven't studied the ETD model yet, this is basically saying that we have the ability to stop somebody from attacking by thwarting their attack. And that symbolizes that set of skills. And then finally, this talks about and reinforces the concept of being centered, remaining centered. So you want to be centered physically, but also mentally and emotionally. So this helps convey this to you every time you perform this salutation, that it's important to remain centered. Our final hand position is the typical hide your weapons hand position, and we use that not so much in that context, but more in the context of we want to remain in control at all times. We want to be in control of our emotions, we want to be in control of our physical activities, and we want to be in control of the general situation that's evolving. We don't want to be some sort of just passive member that gets caught up in something. We want to be able to step in and take control of the situation. So this is a controlling type hand position. The hand position also represents our destructive skills. So we have these destructive skills, we keep them in check, but we have these destructive skills, and this connotes that for you. And then finally, this hand position suggests that we want to be able to remain aware of natural laws. And that includes some just fundamental physics, the dynamics of motion, timing, distancing, all those elements of natural laws. We want to be fully immersed in those and know those quite naturally, so that as a conflict evolves, they're not something we have to think about. We're just part of who we are, and we're able to react to situations spontaneously. I wanted to provide some observation about how and when we use these two forms of salutation. The informal bow salutation, we use that again as we enter a training area or to show respect to a more senior person. But our form of bow is a little bit different than many martial arts styles, and certainly different than something you might see in a traditional Japanese setting. So in those settings, you'll see people bow and they look down. It's just a sign of respect in that cultural setting. But we do it a little bit differently. We look straight ahead. So we look and maintain a visual field of view throughout the entire bowing sequence so that we maintain situational awareness. It's just part of our martial art concept that we must always be aware of what's going on around us so we don't look down. We maintain a full field of view as we bow. The formal salutation, we use that at the beginning and the end of things like private lessons, group classes, ranking examinations, seminars. So at the beginning and end of those training sessions, we will have a formal salutation. A kata is a little bit different. With katas, we have a beginning formal salutation, but at the end, we have a very abbreviated closing salutation, which involves just this last part of the formal salutation. So a kata will begin with a formal salutation, but will end with just this last little bit of the salutation. So I just wanted to provide some additional context for how and when we use these salutations, and hopefully that provides some better explanation for things you may observe in your own dojo. The final point I wanted to make about the formal salutation is that there's a slight difference between the way an instructor and a student perform that same salutation. The student will perform the salutation, as we discussed earlier, by moving the left leg in and back out. But an instructor will perform the same salutation by moving the right leg in and back out. Now this is only when the instructor is working with a student. If the instructor is himself or herself a student, then they will use the left leg form of the salutation. This has no purpose other than to perform symmetrical movements while on a training floor. So if you have one person moving, these two people were facing each other, assume this is the student and this is the instructor, and they're facing one another. So if the student moves the left leg in and out, they will move in this direction. And if the instructor were to perform the salutation by moving the left leg, they'll move in this direction. So you get the two people moving like this. But if the instructor moves the right leg instead of the left, then as the student moves, you'll see them both move in a more symmetrical or patterned movement. And that's the only purpose for instructors moving slightly differently than students. It also helps with newer students, so it's a little less confusing to the student to see somebody moving in that way rather than moving what looks like to the same way to a newer student. So that's the only purpose for that slight variation in how an instructor and a student will perform the salutation. So I hope this helped you. If you have questions, please talk to your instructor, and they'll be glad to share their insights on salutations. Thank you very much for watching.